Well, good morning, everyone. Glad you got up early to come out and see us and say hi. Um, covering hybrid biomed, and just a question out of the audience. Is anyone been or currently or has someone that reports to them as a hybrid biomed? No, got one. Okay, so a couple. Yeah, it's kind of a novel concept, and we'll go over some of the nuances of how that can help with the current situation in the biomed HTM world. And I want to express my thanks and say Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans in the audience. So what exactly is a hybrid biomed? I suppose depending on your facility or situation, that can be answered in many different questions. When I first got into imaging, I would guess I would be considered a hybrid biomed. So my presentation is going to be a little imaging centric as far as the topic matter, but there are a number of different types of hybrid biomeds. So we have the hybrid biomed imaging person. And then after that, you can have a hybrid biomed IT, which would be really handy with all the cybersecurity and interfacing with IT. It's nice to have someone that's actually familiar with both worlds to kind of make that work. And then we also have biomed sterilizer tech. And those have been around for a while. I've known people that have been in that situation for decades. So there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all hybrid title, but like I said, based on my own experiences, we'll focus more on the imaging side. Well, why would I want to create a hybrid position to start off with? Well, with the current situation with the HTM field, me being one of them, that, you know, we're over 50, half of us are over 50, and there's kind of a need to kind of bring the youth into the business. And so one way that will work is creating a hybrid position. So like I said, 50% of the workforce has probably been increased, is over 50. So, you know, I'm looking at hanging up my dosimeter here in the not so distant future. So we're gonna have people that can make the transition from biomed over to imaging or whatever hybrid area that you might need. So for just the demographics and the you know, situation that, you know, half of us are going to be disappearing here in not so distant future. Creating a hybrid's a good transition to get from younger, less experienced tech over to the imaging side. So getting started. First thing you really want to do is have an experienced biomed. And I know for a lot of managers, that's a very painful experience to give up an experienced biomed, because they're a rare commodity as well. And so you probably want someone that is at least a BMET 2 or higher. I can't recommend trying to throw someone that hasn't had some experience and some good traction into that position, because it does involve kind of straddling the two worlds depending on where your hybrid's pointed at. And also, you know, you want to still have a good solid biomed, because, you know, they're valuable and with their resources and what they're going to do for you going forward as well. So I would say, this is just my guesstimate and my opinion, is someone that's got at least 5 years in the business. You know, that they're very familiar with their current job, and that they've got the skill set and the experience to be able to bridge over to the whatever side you pick, in this case imaging. So education, how do I get my well-trained biomed into whatever my crossover is? So we'll say imaging. for me, my first beginning of making that transition was on the job training. So luckily, the person that I ultimately replaced gave the management a 6-month notice before they retired. So they were able to help make the bridge or the gap from me going from pure biomed over to imaging. Some other options is ISO and third-party training. One example would be RSTI. They have an excellent program for your people if you're just starting out or wanting to learn to get into imaging. I can highly recommend that. There's also manufacturer training, which is the route that I went. I actually was GE factory trained when I made the transition. So there's a number of different ways to get there. And any one of them is going to work really well, but just to give you some options, a little background on how I made the transition. So at the time I was working in the cath lab, which was my primary department, and I took care of everything in the cath lab but the imaging part of it, and the person I replaced was the imaging person for the cath lab. So we had a fairly large cath lab department as well as interventional radiology. So there's really enough business just for, well, actually 2 people, because I also covered IR and their needs. So the, I guess, logical conclusion is that I would be the successor to my imaging counterpart to send over, which I protested because I didn't want to give up my biomed. But after some convincing and volunteering, I then went and did my training at GE for the cath lab. So my situation was a little unique in that I had a specific path that was picked for me. I don't necessarily recommend that you go into that high level of acuity of a modality as your first imaging thing. So it was a bit of a struggle. It probably took me a good 2 years before I even really felt comfortable walking into the cath lab to work on one of their machines. So ideally, I would recommend that you start on something a little less invasive or demanding. One area that you can do is have your hybrid is start working in ultrasound. Now, I had the opportunity to bring 2 people up under me to make them hybrid biomeds, and fortunately, management saw my point and that we should probably start them off on a less demanding modality than the cath lab or vascular. So one area that you could start a person off as a hybrid would be in ultrasound. And not necessarily the fact that the ultrasound itself is that demanding as far as the technology, but the rigors of getting the probes repaired. That was just killing me. I would be spending all kinds of time sending in probes, sending out, bringing them back in, making sure everything matched up and managing that. So I convinced management to say, hey, I have a biomed guy here that's really interested in getting in imaging, and it would be a huge help to me if you could have them manage the ultrasound probes and stuff. So that was kind of their first dip into the imaging world, which was a huge help to me. And if anyone that has an experienced imaging person will greatly appreciate having someone just even manage the probe side of it, not even the repairs. Another reason why ultrasound would be a good thing is you're not exposing the person to ionizing radiation right out of the gate. So, you can work on an ultrasound. You don't have to worry about getting nuked by the machine. You don't have the high voltage with ultrasound. And so it's really a good, I guess, first step, in my opinion, to get your biomed person pointed into the imaging world. And like I said, what's nice about that, and then most of the ultrasounds are portable. So, if they want to take it to the shop and work on it, or take it to a familiar area, so that, the imaging world's kind of a little, has a little bit of a wall that it's I know Biomed struggle with, because once they kind of accept you as, oh yeah, he's our guy, then you get kind of membership benefits. But as a Biomed, they don't know these people normally, and it's like, well, who's this guy? So it's great to be able to take your machine somewhere else where you don't get that stigma of, well, I don't know you, and sometimes how the departments react. In a typical ultrasound image. Injectors. So this would probably be like the next step in my book. I mean, you could actually use ultrasound or injectors as a good entry point. Again, if you have a seasoned imaging person that's got too much on their plate, having someone that knows how to work on injectors is a great introduction to the imaging world, and will also benefit your imaging person. So nice thing about the injectors is, you know, you are working around areas that do have the ionizing radiation. In this case would be CT. And obviously you're not going to go in the CT room to work on the injector while they're doing a scan, but it's kind of a good way for, you know, like a Biomed to understand how some of the protocols work with the radiation and some of the safety, so that you know, you at least kind of get a familiarity, and I don't know, just kind of learn the departments, because if you're there to fix their injectors, they are all too grateful, because without them, they can't do a lot of their exams. And then here's a MRI injector. Again, another great way to get into MRI and to learn the safety protocols and how to work around it. So yeah, the injectors would be kind of a nice step up from the ultrasound world. And again, your imaging person, people will be all too grateful to have someone that can help them deal with some of the peripheral equipment rather than the actual imaging modalities. Expectations. So what should I expect from my hybrid? And I would say that each situation is going to be unique. As far as like a smaller hospital, they might already be a hybrid just by default, because you know you don't have the resources to have a dedicated imaging person. So having someone that can do both sides of the trade is almost like a necessity in some cases. If you're in a larger like hospital or facility, or even like a network where you have people that can specialize in just imaging or just biomed, a hybrid's a good way, like I said, as a bridge to get someone into imaging, as well as taking care of unforeseen needs that might come up. So one thing to keep in mind is your workload. And one thing that I noticed for myself as a hybrid is my management wasn't very thoughtful in their what they thought that I should do. And so cath lab was a very demanding, stressful environment, and you know they needed someone yesterday if something goes down. However, I was doing dialysis, I was working on ventilators, balloon pumps, and doing anesthesia a little bit on the side as well. And all of those are high level items that need attention as well. So my feeling was that management didn't respect, they just tacked on the cath lab as a added bonus for their side. And they didn't respect the fact that I had these other, you know, demands and expectations to, you know, take care of on my biomed side. So there, I had some conversations with my management, and some of it was interesting, some of it was productive, and some of it not so productive. So that's why I'm saying that you should probably have someone that's at least been in the business for a while and has kind of a thick hide, because you're going to get railroaded some days, because you know I got the cath lab over here saying we got a room down, we need you here yesterday. I've got a dialysis machine down, and I mean that's important, because if a person doesn't get their treatment, that's very clinically bad. or if an anesthesia machine goes bad, the OR screaming, you know, we lost a room. As from the management side, you really have to keep things realistic on what you're expecting of your hybrid, because yes, they are a great asset and you build them up right, and they're going to really save the day for you a lot, but don't abuse them. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Service expectations, like I said, hopefully your hybrid's not starting off in the cath lab or some high level acuity like CT or MR, and that they could work around that. You know, if you lose a X-ray room, that's not the end of the world versus, you know, some of the other modalities. And hours. So I saw a significant increase in the amount of hours I was working. You know, as a biomed, it was fairly straightforward. I'd work like 7 to 3:30 unless I was on call. And most of the stuff I worked on could wait till the next day, or I could wheel it out of the room and get it out of the customer's, you know, view, so that it wasn't an issue for them. Now, when you tack on the imaging side of it, most of the time, unless it's a portable or a C-arm or something, you can't just roll it out of the way and get it out of the department's thing. You know, they'll keep looking and seeing the rooms down. So, you know, that did add quite a bit of hours on there, mostly on the imaging side, because like I said, Biomed's fairly manageable. But yeah, keep in mind that if someone is looking into doing this, or if you're thinking of doing this for an employee, you are going to see a significant increase in the amount of hours that they're going to be working. And then stress, imaging, or even some of the other hybrid options. It's stressful stuff. You know, you're not just working on your, you know, bread and butter biomed stuff. You've got other things that tack on an extra level of stress. And, you know, back in the day, I just say, oh, it's 3:30, I'm going home and I'll deal with it tomorrow. Well, no, I mean, I got a room down, I gotta figure it out. And so like I said, you want to really think about either the individual that you're putting in the hybrid position, or that look at their experience level before you decide to go down that road, if you have that option. Value your hybrid technician. So like I said earlier, I felt a little abused. And it, you know, I think if you're in management, or if you're considering getting into this, you got to set realistic expectations. You know, you don't have two people for you. You got one person doing kind of a half job here and a half job there. And, you know, take care of that person, because they're helping you get to the next level. Because if you got your senior imaging guy retiring, or say like you need to save money on some contracts, or the customer has a high level of expectations of what your service should look like, you know, this can really help out in the long run. So some of the things that you might run into, like I said, I mentioned ultrasound and injectors, and that would be a great start for someone that wants to be a hybrid. Typically, they don't have a huge demand or a high demand like some of the other acuities. And I would say that this is kind of your next step up the chain. So like say you got your person, they've been doing the ultrasound or injector thing for a while, and then you say, oh, you know what, let's send them off to RSTI for some of their phase training. And some of the stuff that they might experience getting into that would be your general X-ray, which again is a great path to, if you're going to bring them up into the imaging world. So one of the, I guess, basic breakdown of what a diagnostic X-ray system looks like, you have your X-ray tube to produce the ionizing radiation. You have an image receptor, which is used to record the radiographic image, and then it can either be recorded with a digital detector, CR, or film cassette, which you might laugh and say, well, who uses film anymore? One of the hospitals that I recently serviced at, I saw a film truck parked out in one of the medical office buildings. So the film dinosaur still lives in some corners. So little for those of us that can remember the film. And here's your basic general X-ray system. Um, you have your X-ray tube and collimator. You have your table. Down here you have your image receptor. Most of them now is like a detector. And then over here you have the generator. And really, as far as the system goes, this is actually a great place for someone to start learning how X-ray works and all the little nuances behind it, as well as the safety. So in conjunction with the generator, you have your X-ray tube. It has a cathode, anode, filaments, in most cases a rotor. It's placed in a vacuum sealed enclosure surrounded by lead and aluminum shielding. And like I said, most of your general X-ray systems are fairly straightforward, nothing too complicated, which also makes a hybrid useful. Say if you have like a large network, say maybe you have a lot of clinics that you have to take care of and they have an X-ray room, this would be a perfect, kind of way to point your hybrid tech to get some real-time experience and to work on systems that maybe aren't in as high demand as, say, like the hospital would be. And then here's the close-up of the X-ray. So you got your collimator, you have your X-ray tube back here, you have your exposure controls, as well as your movement on your OTS, which is your overhead kind of movement system. Whoops. Oh, yeah, if I can run the clicker here, that would be a bonus. So one of the areas you can also start them off in is in portable X-ray, which works great in the biomed world because we tend to be somewhat reclusive at times. So to be able to take a device and go take it somewhere and be out of sight, out of mind is very helpful. So, your portable X-ray, it's nice, everything's self-contained. You don't have to worry about the high voltage. This is 120 volts. You can roll it down to the shop, as long as your counterparts don't mind getting a little scatter radiation. And so it's a great way. Then if you got your senior guy, then they can stand and say, oh yeah, you could do this, or you might try that, or whatever. That way, then you don't have to pull someone away from their room or ask them to go out to the floor. Another good one, especially if, say, your biomed is kind of OR centric, if they're up in the OR a lot, to have somebody that's both able to work on the traditional OR equipment as well as being able to work on C-arms, and you don't have to drag them out of the OR. You can find an open OR room, go in there, and then you can do your exposures and troubleshoot the system without having to, excuse me, drag it all the way down to the biomed shop or outside of the OR. Another area, kind of like ultrasound and injectors, that's a good way to get someone started in imaging and make that transition, is doing the MR coils. And it's kind of its own like little specific world, with MR being kind of its own isolated thing with the magnetic energy and stuff. So if you have aspirations of having your hybrid eventually maybe replace an MR person, this would be a great way to get the introduction so that they're used to working around the magnet, the protocols working in the department, and how that all works without actually having to work on the machine. Here's some of the different types of coils that are used in MR. You have volume coils, that can surround a whole like portion of the body. They have better image resolution than a surface coil, and volume coils can both transmit and receive signals. That's kind of a technical thing that if, allows the person to have kind of an exposure to MR and how it all works. And here's the volume coil here, be like a arm or wrist coil. And here's the surface coil. And these aren't quite as good as the volume coils as far as making images. Oh. So that would lay over the body part. Obviously, it's kind of hard to slip a, your whole torso into a volume coil. So they lay these across, and then this helps enhance the signal so that you can get better image quality. And again, having someone that can deal with the coils, depending on your facility. Some facilities are very, very nice with their coils and take really good care of them, and other ones just treat them like, we won't go there. So it probably depends on the demand in the facility and how the coils work. And it's a lot like the ultrasound probes. You call up the company, say, hey, I have this type of coil. They send you out a loaner, you send yours in, and then they repair it and send it back. So just having someone managing that is huge for the imaging people. And like I said, gives valuable experience and time for the biomed person. Pros and cons of creating a hybrid position. I really can't think of a lot of cons, but we'll cover some of the drawbacks and some of the pros. So if you're thinking about getting into a hybrid position or you're trying to create someone, hopefully you're looking at getting better pay, because you are advancing from your current biomed position into a more complicated and more demanding position doing the imaging, or even some of the other hybrids. So you do want to, well, I guess as a tech, you would probably want to expect that they're going to bump you up in pay. If you're in management, is a reward for that person taking on the challenge, give them a little compensation, that would help. The career advancement, so with the goal, I guess, for someone to eventually transfer over into the hybrid that they're currently covering, so that they move up from a biomed position into, like I said, my case, an imaging position. And then also the training opportunities, because I mean, one of my rewards as a biomed tech was get to go to school and to advance my skills and opportunities. And imaging is very training intensive with all the different modalities and the type of stuff that you're working on. Cost savings. So here's a huge one for the facility and for management. A hybrid can save you a ton of money, and they can bring their experience as a biomed. They can still do the on-call rotation, and they can also do some imaging modalities. So you don't have to call in a vendor. Say if you have a BMET 3, he's never worked on an X-ray system, and it's like, it's down, it's our main ER room, we need someone in now. Well, with your hybrid, you don't have to call in the vendor. They can take care of it for you. Another thing, when I first kind of took over the vascular and cath lab modalities, I was able to save the hospital right off the bat well over $100,000, because we're able to put our contract on a first look basis rather than being 100% under the vendor. And so they paid for my education and all my training within, the time that they took them off a full service contract. They got all their money back and then some. So if you're looking at it from a facility standpoint or a management standpoint, this can be really good for your budget planning and saving the facility a lot of money. Burnout. huge issue doing a hybrid position because it is demanding, and you know, you as a biomed slash hybrid, you feel obligated to help the departments that you've I guess at some level kind of like walked away from. Doesn't mean you totally have gone away, but you know, this is the opportunity to bring up some of the younger techs and the junior techs and to help filling that position that the hybrids kind of vacated. So yeah, no, there was a lot of obligation that I felt, like the dialysis department. I was the only person doing dialysis. So at that time, that was huge. And dialysis is a very demanding modality, I guess if you want to call it, to kind of straddle with, again, another high stress modality. So yeah, you'll want to really be careful, both as a tech and manage yourself and say that, you know, at some point I'm going to have to walk away from this, and that the younger, more junior people, you know, that's your opportunity to bring them up to fill the spots that you're vacating to move up into your higher position. So that is a drawback, and you know, hopefully when that position, I was just kind of like, I don't know, thrown to the lions as far as, you know, your cath lab guy, our cath lab guy's leaving, guess what, you're him now. And so yeah, a little thoughtfulness and planning when you create one of these positions, or if you're thinking about getting into one of these positions, to keep that in mind, because it really is easy to get burned out from doing that type of position. Long-term solutions. So what's nice about this is a goal that you're pointing the person towards. Someday they're going to be a full-time, whatever the hybrid, after the hybrid is. So in my case, it was imaging. I did the hybrid position for a few years, and then eventually it opened up where I became the full-time imaging person, and I was able to completely walk away from biomed. I'll be honest, I like still doing biomed. I did anesthesia for about 15 years, and I love helping the new guys learn it, because I really think anesthesia is a cool thing. So I don't completely wash my hands of doing biomed work. I still enjoy it, and I think it's very rewarding. But the long-term solution is, now I've been in imaging coming up on 19 years next year. So I got the last half of my career in something that was a little more challenging, a little more rewarding, I guess in a sense that, so yeah, so it's a long-term solution. You get a younger person in, and you know, hopefully you'll get a lot of good years and work from them that will replace that senior imaging person that wants to retire. Recommendations. So like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to throw I mean, unless it's absolutely necessary, say like you got a 100-bed hospital and this person's going to have to be able to work both sides of the aisle. You want to go slow and steady with your hybrids. You don't want to like just dump it on them and say, you know, here you go, here's the kingdom, now figure it out. And also, you know, like I said, for myself, I enjoy the biomed aspect of things. It's you know, you're still fixing broken stuff, but I like the physiological challenges. I like being out on the floors, because it's kind of boring to go to the department over and over and over again. So, you know, being able to go into the OR and working on equipment, as well as going out on the floors, it gives me, I guess, a sense of purpose and reward in just fixing broken X-ray machines. And then plus that, I like to help the more junior techs out. You know, you get home from a service school, they teach you a lot, and they you know about the machine, but it's a whole different ball game from when you get trained on something to actually dealing with it out in the field, or you know, at the department level. So to have someone senior, just like I had a lot of senior imaging guys help me out through my career to understand that side of it, I still like helping the junior people in the biomed side understand how a ventilator works or how an anesthesia machine works or whatever. And I think that's just as valuable as sending someone to school. Just kind of my opinion. So yeah, no, whatever hybrid combination you think of, you know, keep in mind that yeah, they have all that biomed experience and they're learning the new stuff. So you know, kind of go easy on them and work with them to grow that position. Because if you're successful at doing that, then you're going to have a full-time seasoned person to replace someone that you lost due to either career change or retirement. So as a technician, definitely work with management. So if you're thinking about, I don't know, I was sitting there, I'd been doing biomed for a couple decades, and I was kind of thinking, well, what am I going to be doing when I'm 50? You know, I don't know if I want to necessarily keep doing this or, you know, being stuck where I was. And so you know, working with management and let them know and say, hey, you know, I would like to learn how to do imaging, and I'd be willing to kind of work on both sides until that transition happens. That's a win for management, that's a win for the technician, and helps the facility out by having a highly valued, skilled person be able to learn new skills, but can still kind of manage their previous life. Consider work-life needs. So like I said, after I became a hybrid, my hours increased. I knocked down all kinds of overtime, so that was never a problem coming up with a reason to work overtime. And life needs, you know, if you have family or say you have another situation, maybe you're into, I don't know, sports and you're coaching a team or whatever, this will be disruptive. So you're going to get more demands from your job and expectations from your job than you may have just doing traditional biomed. Another thing to consider, which was handy and has helped me over the years, was getting certified. Obviously, as a hybrid, you're not going to get your radiology certification right out of the gate, but if you're still waiting to get your biomed certification, that's a huge help as well. So certification is a good option if you're considering getting into a hybrid. And thank you for your time.